Hello everyone, it is me, Dan here with another video, and finally, Spider-Man No Way Home has come out in the UK cinemas. Of course, I know this is 2 days earlier than what it is for other people in the US and a lot of other places around the world, but thankfully, us lucky Brits here in the UK, we get the film 2 days early. I went to my screening today, 8:30 in the morning, but I wanted to get the earliest screening possible for this film because I did not want to have to do a case of staying off the internet for the whole of the Wednesday until like 8 in the evening. I couldn't get midnight screening, so 8:30 in the morning had to do. Bit of a mad decision, but I was excited for this film. The day was finally here. So the story of No Way Home revolves around Peter going to Doctor Strange and asking him to conjure a spell where everyone will forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, in retaliation to obviously what Mysterio did at the end of Spider-Man Far From Home, where he exposed Peter's identity to the world. Let's just say it doesn't exactly go to plan, and as a result, a load of villains that we have seen from previous Spider-Man films, from the Sam Raimi trilogy and the Mark Webb duology, come over into the MCU Spider-Man universe and wreak havoc upon the city. That is all I'm going to say in regards to this film's story, because as you can probably tell by the title and the thumbnail for this video, this is going to be a spoiler-free review. And I just think it's unfair for me to be out and posting a spoiler review when there's large sections of the globe that still haven't had a chance to go and watch this film in the theatres. So the game is, I'm going to be doing this review. This is going to be my spoiler-free review of the film, and then I will be uploading a spoiler review / discussion, which will probably get uploaded either on the Saturday or the Sunday, just so everyone's had a chance to see the film. So don't worry, if you haven't seen the film or it's not come out in your country, this is going to be a spoiler-free review. Short summary of how I felt when I walked out of the cinema. I really loved this film. I had quite weird expectations because obviously I was very excited given what the trailer showed and what was rumoured behind the scenes of what could be in the film, but I was also kind of worried that the film would feel really bloated, that it would almost be like that we had too much, that all of this fan service with the villains coming in would take away from Peter's actual story and it wouldn't feel like a Spider-Man film. Well, I'm happy to report that this is 100% a Spider-Man film, and I will go on record and say not only is this the best Spider-Man film in the MCU, this is probably my favourite Spider-Man movie since the Raimi trilogy. It's a big thing to say, but honestly, I loved this movie that much. So starting off with the positives, kind of leading on to what I said with the whole sentiment of this feeling like a Spider-Man film, what I mean by that is that despite the scale of this film and all the things that come into play, especially like I say with all the villains coming in from all these universes, what I like the most is that deep down to the core, this feels like a Spider-Man film, and all the MCU things or connections to the MCU don't overtake that. At the core of everything, this does feel like a Spider-Man film, because that's always been one of the things that has kind of been my minor negatives with Homecoming and Far From Home, which was that whilst they tried to be Spider-Man films, they were so integrally linked to strong connections with the MCU that for me it kind of took away a little bit of what made the Raimi trilogy and the Mark Webb duology really kind of interesting, was the fact that it was just Peter in his own universe. He didn't have to worry about other heroes. And although you could argue that in this one you have it with him and Doctor Strange, but the way that they use Strange in this film doesn't completely override Peter as a character. This still definitely feels like a Spider-Man film foremost and forefront, which was a really good way to go about it. And I like the fact as well that this story has a Peter Parker who by the end of it grows into a much more mature Spider-Man, and this Peter actually goes on a journey. I think this is really strong in terms of developing him as a character and progressing him, and seeing this character come full circle from where we first saw him as this naive young kid in that little extended cameo in Civil War all the way up to here, this kind of 5-year journey. It really feels like we progress somewhere with him with the events that go on in the film. It leaves it off in a really good place, which I'm really excited to see how they could maybe explore that if we do ever see Tom Holland again in the MCU as Spider-Man. Probably my favourite storyline that I've seen the character of Peter Parker and Spider-Man go on, like I said, since the Raimi trilogy. Kind of something that I've always felt like is the issue with MCU Spider-Man. He never really progressed much as a character. He never really grew. I feel like he grows a lot throughout this film with the events that go on. The cast and the chemistry between them is just as amazing as it is, as always. Of course, you kind of got the core three of the gang with Peter, MJ, and Ned. Of course, they are all brilliant. The actors that play them are all just as amazing as they were in the other two films. This is easily Tom Holland's best performance as Spider-Man. There are some great scenes in here where he really gets to showcase his acting, and it just makes you realize how damn impressive an actor he is at such a young age, and just how he's able to lead this film and just carry so many scenes that require so much of him. He goes through so many emotions throughout the whole film, but Tom Holland just pulls it off. He really does, and he does such a good job of just creating this character who feels like he goes through things in this film, and you relate to him and you feel for him, which is just really, really awesome to see. Doctor Strange has a really, really good fit, and he really has a good back and forth between him and Spider-Man. I really like their dynamic with one another. I also think this is the film that by far uses Marissa Tomei as Aunt May the best. I didn't mind her in Homecoming. I feel like in Far From Home she was literally pointless. Here I really like the role she serves in this film. This is easily the best of Aunt May in the whole MCU with Spider-Man and how they've used it. I think she's really, really good here, and I like her role in the film. We've got Happy Hogan as well that's kind of wandering around as well. He helps from time to time. I liked him in here. He didn't feel as overbearing as he did sometimes in Far From Home, so I like that as well. And I will say as well, in regards to the cast and the chemistry, I think this is easily the best version of Peter and MJ together, because in Far From Home they tried their best, but because there was no groundwork there from what they did in Homecoming, it felt a bit jarring to me. But I think the way they show it in this film, you genuinely feel that these two love and feel for each other, which is just something, like I say, that I found it a bit hard to buy into at times in Far From Home because of Homecoming, but I feel like this one benefits from, obviously, Far From Home. You saw them getting closer together, and in this film you buy the relationship between the two of them a lot more, or at least I personally did this time around. The villains as well that we have from the other films, really, really cool to see them. In terms of the highlights, it would probably have to be between Green Goblin and Doc Ock, but I would have to say Green Goblin, just because Willem Dafoe, he kills it in this role. He's a terrific actor, and of course I loved him in the original film, but my god, when he came on to the screen and some of the scenes that he has as Green Goblin, honestly might be legit up there for one of the best villains in the MCU, because we can technically chuck him in now because he's canon, I guess. Doc Ock as well is really, really good to see, especially what they did with him and his character. I had some reservations to what they were going to do to him and how he would fit and what story decisions they would take with him that didn't betray his arc in Spider-Man 2. Again, I won't delve into anything like specific for that because of course it's more safe for spoilers, but I still really like what they did with him in here. Alfred Molina was really good, and I even really liked Electro in this one, which is kind of crazy because I haven't reviewed The Amazing Spider-Man 2 yet, but a little bit of a spoiler for that, I'm not a huge fan of Electro, but the way they wrote him in this film was so much better, not just from the appearance, but his attitude and his demeanor as well. I found him a far more memorable and threatening villain than I did in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Anybody who watched The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and wasn't totally sold on Electro, I think you'll like his performance a lot more in this one. Sandman's pretty cool as well. They have a pretty cool dynamic with him and how he views Peter. I did like that about his character. Lizard's kind of there in the background. He's probably the one that gets shortchanged the most. But again, when you've got 5 villains, you do have to try and find a way to morph them around and try to give priorities to some of them because of how they've kind of got more of a fan base than others. So I understand that, and I think they all serve their purpose as being threats, and I think the way they're written into the film is good enough for me personally, so I didn't really take it as that much of an issue. The action in here as well is really good. I really enjoyed the action sequences, really, really cool and interesting. The one that we've seen between Peter and Doc Ock on the bridge, that's a really, really cool fight sequence. The end fight sequence on the Statue of Liberty is really, really good as well. Just in general, the action is just as impressive as it was in the other films, but I think just in here, I think the way that it's framed and the maneuvers that Spider-Man pulls off within them, I just found really visually eye-catching, and so they stuck with me a lot more compared to the ones that we had in Homecoming and Far From Home. And that kind of leads me on to the direction as well. I think this film is directed way, way better than it. This one actually feels like it has a style, because one of my issues with the other two films is it just kind of felt like a generic Marvel film. When it came to the direction and the shots and the camera movements, it just didn't feel very special. In this one, it really does feel like John Watts is really kind of adding his own personality to it with the whole use of like tracking shots in the film. There's some zoom frames and just the way the camera moves around. It feels different. It doesn't feel like something that you just see in 8 out of 10 MCU films. This does genuinely feel like something different, which I really appreciated. Kind of makes me a bit more excited to see him when he directs Fantastic Four and what he'll do with that off the back of this, because if this is anything to go by, I'm really interested to see what he's going to bring to that film as a director. And the score as well by Michael Giacchino, easily his best score out of any of the Spider-Man films, because I've not really been a big fan of his music. He's never really created all that memorable pieces of music with his first 2 attempts, but I feel like with this one, he definitely knocks it out of the park. I really loved a lot of the score here. It really helped to push the moments of the film where it's needed in key situations. It just creates some really interesting themes and really just memorable music that really stuck with me. A lot of the score, even now when I'm here trying to record this review, I can still remember so much of it in the back of my mind, which I just couldn't say for Homecoming or Far From Home. In terms of any negatives or issues that I have with Spider-Man No Way Home, the only one slight one that I do have is that I do think the first half of the film does jump around a little bit. Again, I won't get into specifics. It's mainly from a story standpoint, but obviously I don't want to spoil anything for you guys that hasn't already been shown in the trailers, so I won't go into it. But basically, story-wise, they do try to tackle certain aspects, and it does feel like they're trying to do it, but it does jump around quite a little bit, and so it can feel a bit hard to follow at times. It does feel like they're trying to get to something, but they're trying to explore all these other avenues as well. But it is quite kind of like jumping around between different scenarios, which I didn't dislike it completely, but it definitely, I noticed it while I was watching it in the cinema. The other one would be as well, I say with the first half of the film, there are a few moments where I do feel like the kind of the MCU humor doesn't work all that well. I could only really think of like maybe 2 or 3 moments where it happened in the film, but it mainly happened within the first half of the film. That's really kind of where my main issues lie. There's because the back half of this movie is sublime, probably a 10 out of 10 for me. I think they really perfect the tone. From that point onwards, there's virtually nothing that I dislike about the movie. The film is just like a 10 out of 10 from that point onwards. But yeah, if you watch the first half of the film, there are a few moments where the comedy is a bit iffy, but when you get to the moments midway through the film and you go beyond that, that issue's gone completely, and so is the issue with the film jumping around. It feels way more focused, way more streamlined on what it wants to do and what it wants to achieve. So in regards to my final thoughts, I really like No Way Home. I really enjoyed it. Definitely my favorite MCU Spider-Man film, my favorite Spider-Man film since the Raimi trilogy. I really like this. It has the fan service, but it doesn't feel like it takes away from the film itself. It earns the right to use the fan service in the way that it does, and it uses it in a way that's really memorable and just really fucking amazing. Like, my cinema just went mad at so many points throughout this film's runtime, and for very good reasonings. I kind of just got this feeling when I left the cinema that I just haven't had for a Spider-Man film. Really, like I say, since I was the 7-year-old me when he left the cinema for Spider-Man 3. That's just how it was for me. So, in regards to a score, I'm actually going to hold off on giving a score for this one, because I'm actually going to be seeing this film again in a few days' time. And that'll be kind of when I look at the film from a bit more of a critical standpoint, and I can kind of cement my thoughts completely. So I'm going to hold off on a score. You'll find that out when I record my spoiler review, which, like I say, I'm going to be holding off on that one until I've seen the film a second time. Then I'll probably give the film a score then, just because I kind of like to, especially with films as big as this, I like to see the film twice before I kind of start giving final ratings. See if these like fanboy emotions still remain there after the second watch, which they probably will do. And yeah, we'll see what happens from there. But like I say, I think this film's brilliant. The best MCU Spider-Man film. Absolutely loved it. A love letter to all of Spider-Man fans and Spider-Man medium. If you're a Spidey fan, you'll love it. In fact, if you're a Spidey fan and you live here in the UK, you've probably already seen it by now. Thank you all very much for watching my review on Spider-Man No Way Home, of course. Let me know in the comment section down below what you thought about this film, if you have seen it by any chance. Just don't be a dickhead, don't post spoilers, just let me know what you thought about the film, just try not to spoil it for everyone else. Make sure you share the video with your friends. If you do like what you see here and you want to see more, feel free to go ahead and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any more uploads from me. And with that being said, I will hope to see you all later for the next video. Goodbye.